Hello everyone, and welcome back to Haunted Tales. Tonight, we're stepping beyond the gates of safety, into the places that never truly sleep, airports, the crossroads of the modern world, where millions come and go, chasing destinations, dreams, and departures. But behind the bright lights, sterile corridors, and endless announcements, there's another side to these terminals, a darker one. In this episode, we'll uncover 10 of the most disturbing true airport horror stories ever documented, drawn from security reports, air traffic transcripts, and chilling testimonies from staff and passengers who witnessed the unexplainable. From the ghostly concourses of Singapore Changi to the haunted airfields of Alaska's frozen wilderness, these stories remind us that not all travelers ever truly leave. Some remain, lost between arrival and departure. Every account you're about to hear has roots in real events, shared by those who worked the night shift, cleaned the empty gates, or patrolled the runways long after the last plane had departed. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Haunted Tales for more nightly descents into the unknown and turn on the notification bell. Because when the terminal grows quiet and that final flight disappears into the fog, you might just hear a boarding call meant for someone who's no longer among the living. A sprawling ocean of concrete and glass. Every hour, hundreds of planes take off and land, a never-ending rhythm of thunder, neon lights, and human movement. But amid all the noise, there's one place most night staff quietly avoid, a gate where time doesn't seem to move the same way. Gate 32B, they call it, the home of the vanishing passenger. A businessman named Daniel Kessler was flying home from San Francisco, stranded overnight at LAX after a storm delay. He wandered through the quiet terminals looking for coffee. When he saw her, the same elderly woman sitting by gate 32B, staring out toward the runway lights, she was crying softly, clutching a suitcase to her chest. Daniel approached and asked if she was okay. She told him she was waiting for her husband, that they were supposed to be on the same flight, but he'd gone ahead to check on the plane. When Daniel mentioned that there were no flights at that hour, she seemed confused. "That can't be right," she said. "They just announced boarding." She gestured toward the intercom, which was silent. Daniel stepped away to find an attendant. When he came back 2 minutes later, the woman and her suitcase were gone. Airport police checked the area. The only thing they found was a pair of old-fashioned leather gloves lying on the seat. In the morning, security reviewed the footage. Once again, Daniel was alone, but that wasn't the end. In the years that followed, sightings increased. Between 2001 and 2009, janitors, baggage handlers, and even TSA agents began reporting strange events near Gate 32B. Motion sensors activating without movement, heels clicking across the tile when no one was there, an empty terminal filled with the faint aroma of perfume, floral, sweet, and unmistakable, and the most unsettling detail, the air around the gate always felt colder. Sometimes as much as 10 degrees lower than the rest of the terminal. Airport staff even began referring to her in code. PAX 32, Bravo. Short for Passenger 32B, there are rumors of internal memos, quietly deleted after journalists began asking questions in 2011. One former officer who worked night security later said, "We all knew about her. The cameras don't catch her face, but the heat sensors pick her up, like she's there, but not made of the same thing as we are." Then came the viral Reddit post in 2015. A user named Traveling Dharma wrote that during a long layover, he met an older woman dressed in outdated clothing. She asked if she could borrow his phone to call her mother. When he handed her his iPhone, she turned it over in her hands, puzzled. "Is this some kind of radio?" she asked. He laughed softly and told her it was a phone. She didn't understand. When he asked her name, she smiled and said, Margaret Litton." That name matched a missing passenger from Pan World Flight 912, the flight that vanished in 1955. The post went viral overnight, and though skeptics mocked it, dozens of travelers replied with eerily similar experiences. Some claimed to have seen a woman dressed for another era. Others described smelling gardenias without explanation, and at least one janitor commented that her cleaning crew avoids Gate 32B after midnight, because sometimes when you pass by the glass, you can see her reflection sitting behind you. December 2019. Renovations began in Terminal 3. Construction crews worked late nights repairing ceiling fixtures above. You guessed it. Gate 32B at 2:13 a.m. Motion sensors triggered 3 consecutive times. When technicians checked the footage, the feed glitched, flickering static for 10 seconds, before briefly revealing a pale silhouette of a woman walking across the gate. Her image was blurred, translucent, but one frame was clear enough to make out a trench coat and a suitcase in her hand. The timestamp on that footage read 0317 to 1955. When the IT team tried to recover it, the file auto-erased. Its name, found later in the system logs, was Passenger 914. Over the next few years, new reports surfaced. Pilots, cleaning staff, overnight travelers. Each story eerily consistent. A polite woman, vintage clothes, asking about a flight that no longer exists. A pilot in 2021 described it best in a video that quickly disappeared. Every airport has ghost stories. Ours is different. You smell her before you see her. Perfume like your grandmother's dresser. And if you hear heels behind you after midnight, don't turn around. It began, as these things often do, with a single report. A night custodian named Rosa Martinez, working the graveyard shift back in 1989. She was mopping near Gate 32B when she noticed an elderly woman sitting alone. Quiet, calm, hands folded neatly over a small leather suitcase. Rosa approached her gently and asked, "Ma'am, are you waiting for a flight?" The woman smiled politely. Her voice was soft. "Yes, dear. Flight 914 to New York. Has it been called yet?" Rosa frowned. There was no Flight 914, not that night, not on any schedule. She turned for a moment to check the monitor. When she looked back, the woman was gone, not walking away, not fading into the crowd, just gone. When security reviewed the footage, they saw Rosa talking, but to no one. No passenger ever appeared on camera. Weeks later, Rosa learned something strange. There had been a Flight 94 tour, Pan World Airways, but it disappeared in 1955. The flight left New York and never arrived in Miami, vanished, without a trace, and the airline never used that number again. Yet the same woman kept returning, always at Gate 32B, always asking about a flight that ceased to exist 70 years ago. In 1997, a businessman named Daniel Kessler had a layover at LAX. He was sitting near Gate 32B when he saw her, the same woman, crying softly beside her suitcase. He offered to help. She told him her husband was on the same flight, and that it was delayed. Daniel told her there was no such flight. She looked at him in confusion, as if she didn't understand what year it was. He went to get an attendant. When he returned, her seat was empty, but her suitcase was still there. Inside were a pair of gloves, a rosary, and a Pan World boarding pass, dated March 17, 1955. When security logged it into storage, it disappeared overnight. No one signed it out. No one admitted touching it. It simply vanished. By the early 2000s, the story had spread among night shift workers, janitors, TSA agents, baggage handlers. Everyone had heard of the old lady at 32B. Some swore she smelled of gardenia perfume before she appeared. Others said motion sensors picked up her presence, but cameras showed nothing. And more than once, security alarms were triggered at the exact moment her name was whispered on the intercom. Even airport police had their own secret log, labeled Pax Phantom 32B. Those files were quietly deleted in 2011. No one knows why. In 2015, a traveler using the screen name Traveling Dharma shared his experience online. He said he met a woman in vintage clothing at LAX, sitting near the charging ports. She asked to borrow his phone, said she needed to call her mother. When he handed her his iPhone, she stared at it like it was alien. She thought it was a walkie-talkie. When he asked her name, she smiled and said, Margaret Litton, a name later found on the missing passenger list from Pan World Flight 914. His post went viral, and dozens of others claimed they too had smelled gardenia perfume that same night. Then came the footage. December 2019. Renovations were underway near Gate 32B. Around 2 in the morning, motion sensors began tripping. When technicians checked the footage, they found a brief flicker, a human-shaped blur moving across the frame. But the timestamp Read March 17, 1955. Moments later, the system crashed. The file auto-erased itself. Its recovered name? Passenger_914. Between 2020 and 23, new reports emerged. A janitor claimed she heard heels clicking behind her on an empty floor. A pilot posted on social media that she'd smelled perfume in an empty jet bridge. And a travel vlogger accidentally recorded a faint reflection, a woman sitting alone at gate 32B. When he turned the camera, the seat was empty. Skeptics tried to explain it away. They said it was an urban legend, a ghost story born from a fictional flight. But even the skeptics can't explain the radio transmission that happened in January 2024, a control tower. Operator report. Miami International Airport, a gateway between worlds, tropical air colliding with cold steel. Every day, thousands of flights rise above the Florida coastline, carrying people toward new beginnings. But there's one flight that never made it to its destination. And some say it never stopped flying. Because long after its wreckage was cleared, long after the bodies were buried and the investigation was closed, passengers and crew at Miami International began hearing and seeing things that shouldn't exist. This is the story of Eastern Airlines Flight 401 and the echoes it left behind. Soft rainfall intensifies. It was the night of December 29, 1972. Eastern Airlines. Flight 401, a brand new Lockheed L-1011, TriStar, took off from JFK Airport in New York, bound for Miami. On board were 163 passengers and 13 crew members. For most of the flight, everything went perfectly. Smooth skies, routine chatter. But as they approached Miami, the nose gear indicator light failed to show it was locked in place. The pilots, Captain Bob Loft and First Officer Don Repo, tried to troubleshoot the issue. They put the plane into a slow holding pattern over the Florida Everglades, a black, swampy expanse stretching endlessly beneath them. Unbeknownst to them, someone accidentally leaned against the control column. The autopilot disconnected, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the plane began to descend. At 11:42 p.m., Flight 401 slammed into the dark Everglades. The crash tore through the swamp with unimaginable force. Metal shrieked. Fuel ignited. The night turned into a storm of fire, screams, and silence. 101 people died. Among them were Captain Loft and flight engineer Don Repo. The wreckage was spread across miles of marshland, a mechanical graveyard sinking into black water. Distant thunder rolls, a pause for silence. But this is not a story about the crash. It's what came after. Months later, when Eastern Airlines began rebuilding its fleet, they salvaged usable parts from the wreckage, engines, ovens, seats, control panels, installing them into other L-1011 aircraft to save costs. That's when things started happening. A flight attendant on Flight 318 reported seeing a man in uniform sitting quietly in first class. When she asked for his boarding pass, he didn't respond. He simply looked at her, calm, expressionless. She fetched another crew member. When they returned, the man was gone, but several passengers nearby described the same thing. An older pilot, with graying hair, wearing an Eastern Airlines cap. When the attendant later saw a photograph of Captain Bob Loft, she fainted. That was him, the man she'd spoken to, the dead captain of Flight 401. Another incident occurred aboard Flight 903, en route to Tampa. Crew members reported hearing strange knocking sounds coming from a lower galley compartment, the same type salvaged from Flight 401's wreckage. When the engineer opened the panel, he found nothing but darkness. Moments later, a deep voice whispered, "Watch out for fire." Startled, he dropped his flashlight. When he picked it up, he saw a reflection in the metal surface. It was Don Repo, the flight engineer who had died in the crash. Weeks later, Flight 903 suffered a minor engine fire during landing. No one was hurt, but the crew never forgot the warning. As word spread, reports multiplied. Passengers described cold spots forming mid-flight, sudden drops in temperature as if a freezer had opened nearby. Pilots reported hearing voices on the cockpit intercom, clear as day, even though the channels were inactive. One voice said, "There will never be another crash. We won't let it happen." Maintenance workers found fingerprints on sealed panels. Technicians heard someone breathing through the cockpit mic while the plane was empty. But most unsettling of all were the faces. reflected faintly in windows, in oven doors, and cockpit glass. The same two men, Loft and Repo. In one documented case, a flight attendant named Ginny McCabe was preparing meals when she saw Repo's face reflected in the galley oven door. He spoke softly. "Watch the system. You have a problem." Minutes later, a mechanical fault warning appeared on the flight deck. The crew verified it, and Repo's warning prevented a mid-air failure. After the flight, Ginny swore she'd never fly on that aircraft again. Eastern quietly replaced the galley equipment. At first, the airline dismissed these stories as superstition, the nervous gossip of tired crews. But soon, there were dozens of reports, from flight attendants, engineers, even pilots, all describing the same thing. One day, two Eastern vice presidents boarded a flight equipped with parts from 401. Before takeoff, both saw Captain Loft standing in the galley, clear as day. He looked at them and said, "You don't need to worry about Flight 401 anymore." Then, he disappeared. The two men refused to fly again for months. Passengers began to hear whispers mid-flight. Sometimes laughter in the cabin when it was empty. Sometimes a tap on their shoulder, only to turn and find no one there. In the mid-70s, the Federal Aviation Administration quietly investigated. The report remained sealed, but internal memos confirmed the sightings were logged by multiple credible witnesses, including senior officers. Eastern Airlines management demanded silence. They removed all salvaged parts from their aircraft, scrapping every piece connected to Flight 401. And just like that, the haunting stopped. For a time, but some say the ghosts never left. They simply followed the planes. In 1981, a Pan Am flight crew reported hearing a voice on their radio, calling Eastern 401, requesting descent clearance. The frequency log showed no such flight. Eastern 401 had ceased to exist 9 years earlier. Soft, tense music builds, rain fades, engine hum returns. To this day, aviation enthusiasts and ghost hunters visit the Everglades crash site. They say the ground still hums faintly at night, as if a massive engine is buried beneath. Locals have reported distant lights flickering in the marsh. Some claim to hear the faint sound of a cockpit warning chime echoing over the water. And once every few years, a pilot reports an odd blip on radar, a transponder code that appears for a few seconds then vanishes. The code, 401. In 1996, a retired air traffic controller named Bill Houghton went on record saying he'd heard the ghost transmission himself. It was the same call sign, same voice, he said. "Eastern 401, this is Miami. Do you copy?" I remember answering, and all I got back was breathing, slow, calm, like someone waiting to land. Music lowers, tone softens. Some people believe Captain Loft and Don Repo never left their aircraft, that they stayed behind, protecting the flights that followed. And maybe that's why no other L-1011 in Eastern's fleet ever crashed. Not one. Even skeptics admit the coincidence is chilling. Years later, when the airline dissolved, its planes were sold to other carriers. One of them, a charter company in South America, reported strange mechanical readings on its first night flight. When the maintenance team opened the cockpit panel, they found two initials scratched faintly into the metal: BL, DR, Bob Loft, Don Repo. The panel had been taken from Flight 401, soft thunder rolls. A single piano note echoes. Miami International stands silent at night, long after the final flights depart. Maintenance carts hum softly down deserted corridors. Fluorescent lights flicker. And sometimes, if you listen closely near gate D14, you might hear it, the faint static of an old transmission. This is Eastern 401, requesting permission to land. Pause. Wind hums through open speakers. Some say the ghosts of Flight 401 are not angry, not vengeful. They're guardians, trapped between duty and eternity, protecting the skies they once ruled. So if you ever fly out of Miami on a quiet, rain-soaked night, and the cabin lights flicker just before takeoff, and you hear a calm voice whisper, "Everything will be fine," maybe, just maybe, they're still watching over you. Soft static crackles, a final transmission fades out. Eastern 401, cleared for landing. Denver International Airport, or DIA, a place built not just on the plains of Colorado, but on decades of speculation, mystery, and unease. It's the largest airport in the United States by land area. Over 33,000 acres of empty prairie, wind and silence. From above, its runways form patterns that have sparked endless theories. From underground tunnels to hidden bunkers, DIA has always been more than just an airport. It's a labyrinth, modern, efficient, and, according to those who work the night shift, haunted. Because out on those endless runways, long after the last plane has landed, some lights turn on by themselves. Runway lights that no longer exist. And sometimes, they lead pilots astray. Faint gust of wind through a radio headset, the sound of static. The first official report came from Captain Thomas Ridley, a seasoned pilot for Frontier Airlines. It was January 2003, just after 2 a.m. His aircraft, Flight 228, was approaching DIA from the northwest. Visibility perfect. Weather calm. Standard conditions. As he prepared for final approach to runway 35R, something caught his attention. A second line of runway lights, bright, blue-white, stretching parallel to his designated landing strip. He radioed the tower, Denver Tower. "This is Frontier 228, confirming active runways. I've got duplicate approach lights on the right side. Please advise." A pause crackled through his headset. Then a confused voice replied, "Negative. Frontier 228. You're cleared for 35R. There are no parallel lights." Ridley frowned. He wasn't hallucinating. They were right there, glowing like a runway meant just for him. He blinked, checked again, and they were gone. No flicker, no fade, just gone. He landed safely, but his hands trembled the entire taxi in. Soft drone begins under narration. The FAA filed it as a visual anomaly. But within 6 months, there were 3 more reports: a cargo pilot, a private jet captain, and an air traffic controller in the tower, all describing the same thing: a phantom runway, fully illuminated, stretching into the blackness of the Colorado night. But when anyone went to check, there was nothing there. No power line, no bulb, no reflection, just frozen dirt and wind. By 2006, whispers among Denver's ground crews had grown darker. They called it the Ghost Strip, a stretch of land to the west of the main field, once part of a decommissioned runway built during the airport's early construction phase. It was paved, then torn up, then built over again. But workers who had been there at night claimed the lights still flickered beneath the soil. One maintenance worker, Eli Sanders, went on record anonymously in 2008. He'd been performing a midnight inspection with 2 others when their vehicle's electronics began to glitch. First, the radio, then the headlights. When they stopped to check their gauges, they noticed the lights, runway lights, glowing faintly through a thin layer of fog ahead of them. Eli said they could even see the heat shimmer rising from them, as if they were powered. They drove closer, and the lights began to blink, sequenced like a guide path. Then, as the truck's tires hit the first light line, everything cut out. No headlights, no engine, no sound, just darkness. Eli swore he heard something next, a low hum, like a distant turbine winding up. Then faintly, the sound of jet engines overhead, but nothing was in the sky. Wind picks up, soft metal creaking sound. For years, reports trickled in. Pilots on final approach said their altimeters spiked for no reason near the west sector. Ground staff described seeing heat, signatures on thermal scanners where no people or machines were present. Security cameras glitched, freezing for exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds whenever the phantom lights were active. But the strangest thing wasn't what people saw. It was what they heard. In 2012, a tower operator named Linda Carver was monitoring runway 35R at 3:41 a.m. through her headset. She heard static, followed by a faint voice. "Denver Tower, Flight 828 requesting final approach." On the West Strip, Linda froze. There was no Flight 828 scheduled that night. She double-checked. No radar return, no transponder code. She replied cautiously, "Say again, aircraft calling." No answer, only the faint whine of a descending engine. That wasn't there. Moments later, the radar briefly pinged a return, an unidentified craft, exactly over the site of the old, decommissioned runway. Then it vanished. Brief pause, faint thunder rolls. The recordings from that night still exist, locked in the airport's internal incident logs. But one technician who reviewed the audio said the voice on the tape sounded distorted, as if it had been transmitted through water. And under the static, you could hear something else, a second voice, whispering, "Landing clearance granted." Over the years, DIA has gained a reputation for strangeness, underground tunnels, bizarre murals. The blue Mustang statue with glowing red eyes that greets travelers at the entrance. But none of those legends unsettle airport staff more than Runway Zero, as they now call it. Because unlike the murals or the art, this one comes with evidence, video, thermal readings, witness reports, and flight radar data, all pointing to something that shouldn't exist. In 2016, a drone operator testing infrared sensors near the western perimeter captured something chilling, a line of heat anomalies, perfectly straight, perfectly spaced, matching the exact layout of the original 1970s-era runway. But the surface temperature around them was 12 degrees hotter than the ground around it. No wiring. No power, no explanation. The footage was sent to airport management. It disappeared within 24 hours. 2 years later, in 2018, a FedEx cargo pilot, Captain Aaron Gill, reported being pulled off course by what he thought was a misaligned landing beacon. He later told investigators that as he descended through thin cloud cover, a second set of runway lights appeared, brighter than his assigned strip, glowing a cold bluish white. He adjusted his descent, then his co-pilot shouted, "There's nothing there!" Gill pulled up just in time. Tower recordings later confirmed. His plane had been descending toward an area of empty land, where the original construction site of the canceled runway once lay. Soft, low strings begin, slow pacing. After that near disaster, the FAA ordered a temporary inspection. Teams searched the area, dug up electrical conduits, tested for magnetic interference. They found nothing. But when they turned off all nearby power feeds, infrared cameras still detected faint light signatures on the soil, as if something buried deep beneath was still trying to turn on. In 2021, one of the maintenance trucks recorded a faint transmission while idling near the West Strip. The audio was time-stamped at 03:17 a.m., the same time of night most sightings occur. It lasted 7 seconds. A man's voice distorted low. "Denver Tower, cleared for landing." "Runway 35R." Then silence. When engineers ran a frequency analysis, they found the signal matched 1970s aviation band modulation, a type of analog frequency no longer used since 1983. Low pulse builds, like a heartbeat. The current airport director refuses to comment publicly, but former employees have spoken anonymously, describing restricted access zones, unexplained power surges, and missing surveillance logs. Even claimed the western field emits a faint electrical charge detectable with standard voltage meters, only between 3s and 3:20 a.m. They call that window phantom time. Local urban explorers have tried, sneaking near the perimeter fences to record the phenomenon, mostly with nothing but blurry footage. But one video from 2022 stands out. It shows a faint row of blue lights flickering in the fog. No reflection, no headlights, no cars nearby, and in the background, caught faintly on the microphone, a single line of dialogue. "This is Flight 237, requesting permission to land." Soft static fades. Tone turns reflective. No such flight existed. Never had. Yet the voice sounded human, desperate, tired, as if it had been asking for clearance. For decades, airport staff avoid the western perimeter now. No one stays out there past midnight. Too many radios go dead. Too many footsteps echo when no one's around. The maintenance crews joke that if you see the phantom lights turn on, you get back in your truck and drive away. Because those who walk toward them don't always come back right. In March 2024, a security guard reported that after following a faint blue glow near the old access road, he blacked out. When he came to, his watch read 3:17 a.m., exactly 12 minutes later than when he'd left his vehicle. He said he could still hear engines overhead, but when he looked up, the sky was empty. Wind slows, eerie silence returns. To this day, Denver International remains one of the most advanced airports in the world. But among its night staff, one rule still stands, unspoken but sacred. Never follow the lights west of runway 35R, because they don't lead you home. They lead you back to a runway that was buried decades ago, to a place where time and flight Singapore's Changi Airport. It stands as a monument of perfection, shimmering glass, lush gardens, and flawless order. It's more than an airport. It's a city that never sleeps, a world of motion wrapped in silence. Travelers praise it for its beauty, its cleanliness, its calm. But beneath that calm, beneath the gentle hum of escalators and the scent of fresh orchids, lies something that doesn't belong, something that doesn't appear on any camera logs, something that refuses to leave. They call her the shadow passenger. It began one quiet night in September 1999. Just after 3 a.m., the terminals were empty. No flights, no announcements, just the hum of fluorescent lights echoing down the polished walkways of Terminal 2. A janitor named Ahmad, part of the night cleaning crew, was mopping the glass corridor between gates F20 and F22. It was routine work, quiet, mindless, peaceful. But then, through the reflection of the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, he saw movement. At first, he thought it was another cleaner, a co-worker maybe. But when he turned, he saw her, a woman, standing outside on the airside tarmac, just beyond the glass, barefoot, wearing a simple white dress. Her long black hair clung to her shoulders as if damp from rain, though the sky was clear. She walked slowly along the painted ground markings, head tilted slightly down, clutching a small handbag. Ahmad froze. That area was sealed. No one could access it without clearance. He rushed toward the window and called out, his voice echoing through the corridor. But she didn't respond. She kept walking, and as she reached the edge of the glass panels, she simply faded into the reflection. Gone. Security searched the area. They checked CCTV feeds, patrol routes, access logs, nothing. No one was there. Not a single frame showed the woman Ahmad described. The footage between 3:38 and 3:44 a.m., the exact time of the sighting, was corrupted. A few weeks later, another incident. A security officer, Corporal Lim, was conducting a perimeter sweep near gate F22, the same stretch of terminal where Ahmad had seen the woman. The airside floodlights cast long shadows across the tarmac. It was just after 2:55 a.m. when he saw someone standing near the service door that led to the jet bridge. A woman. Again. Alone. Motionless. He called out to her. "Ma'am, you're not allowed here." No answer. She turned toward him. And that's when he realized. She didn't have a face. Her features were swallowed in darkness, as if her head was covered in shadow that refused to reflect light. The edges of her form shimmered like heat haze. Then she took one step backward and vanished. Not into thin air, but into the reflection of the glass behind her. The officer stood paralyzed. His radio crackled, his breathing ragged. When he reported it, supervisors wrote it off as exhaustion. But within weeks, other night staff began to whisper about the woman near F22. At first, she was treated like an urban legend, a story told to spook new recruits. The cleaners joked that she was a traveler who'd missed her flight and was still waiting for it to be called. But laughter turned to unease when sightings multiplied. In 2004, an incident forced the management to take notice. A Singapore Airlines flight bound for Bangkok was preparing for takeoff. During final cabin checks, a flight attendant reported that one passenger, seat 32A, hadn't responded during the safety briefing. The seat was visibly occupied by a woman facing the window, her long hair obscuring her face. When the attendant tapped her shoulder, there was no reaction. She turned around to get another crew member. When they returned, the seat was empty. The boarding manifest showed that 32A had been checked in. The barcode had been scanned. The records showed her as present. But security footage at gate F22 told a different story. In the clip, a woman in white approached the boarding scanner. The machine beeped. Her ticket read successfully. But the next second, she was gone. The gate camera showed the walkway empty. No one ever boarded through that line. The footage was reviewed repeatedly, analyzed frame by frame. No tampering, no technical glitch. Yet the woman simply vanished mid-frame. More incidents followed. In 2006, two separate cabin crews reported seeing a female passenger sitting near the rear window during boarding, only to find no one there once airborne. One attendant said she felt a light touch on her arm as she secured the meal carts, followed by the faint smell of jasmine, the kind used in traditional funeral rituals. Another crew member said she saw the woman's reflection staring back from the galley mirror, lips moving soundlessly. When she turned, the galley was empty. Soon, the stories reached the airport's operations office. Officials dismissed them publicly as crew fatigue and optical illusions. But internally, maintenance logs began to reflect another pattern. The thermal imaging cameras installed along Terminal 2 corridors started recording unexplained heat signatures. Faint, human-shaped, lasting only seconds before fading. Always between 2:50 and 3:10 a.m. Always near gate F-22. In 2013, an engineer named Kelvin Yeo was performing a maintenance check beneath Terminal 2's baggage hall, a labyrinth of echoing tunnels and moving belts. Around 3 a.m., he heard footsteps above him, light, deliberate, almost playful. He assumed it was a coworker. He radioed control to confirm. The reply came, all clear topside. The footsteps continued, pacing, circling, stopping directly above him. Then a voice whispered softly through the dark. "Don't leave yet." Kelvin froze, shining his flashlight upward. Through the metal grating above, he saw feet, bare, pale, motionless, standing on the other side of the mesh. He climbed the ladder as fast as he could. When he reached the upper corridor, it was empty. The air smelled faintly of jasmine. After that incident, Changi quietly began rotating its night staff every few weeks. The official explanation was to prevent fatigue, but the workers knew why. They said it was to avoid anyone staying near gate F-22 too long. Still, the encounters didn't stop. In 2016, a cleaner collapsed after claiming he saw the woman's reflection standing behind him in a restroom mirror. In 2018, a pilot refused to push back from the gate, insisting there was still a passenger visible on the jet bridge. Ground control confirmed it was empty. In 2020, a new AI-based surveillance system began flagging anomalies during routine nighttime sweeps. The log showed repeated motion detections near F-22 with no visual confirmation. Each time, the alert carried the same label: passenger detected, seatless. Then came the 2022 footage, the one no one outside airport operations has ever officially seen. A recently installed camera captured a woman standing at the far end of the moving walkway leading to gate 22. She appeared suddenly, one frame empty. The next, there she was. She wasn't walking. She was just there. Her white dress rippled as though caught in a breeze, though the corridor was sealed. She turned her head toward the camera. For a single frame, her face flickered, replaced by static. But when technicians enhanced the footage, they found something chilling. Behind the reflection of her face, layered within the glass, was another face, older, hollow-eyed, and screaming silently. The footage was quietly archived, locked behind administrative clearance. But whispers of it spread through the staff. One engineer who had seen the raw clip said, "She looked like she wanted help, like she was asking us to notice her." Months later, an old record resurfaced during a renovation audit. It detailed a fatal cardiac incident that had occurred in 1985, before Terminal 2 was officially opened. A passenger named Lena Tan, age 28, had collapsed while running toward her departure gate, gate F-22. She died before medics could arrive. Her ticket stub, preserved in the file, showed her assigned seat, 32A, the same seat that had appeared empty in every crew report since 2004. Today, Changi Airport still runs with machine-like precision. Millions pass through its glass corridors every year. But among the night staff, the warnings remain unspoken tradition. If the glass near gate F-22 begins to fog from the inside, leave immediately. If you hear footsteps when you're alone, don't turn around. And if your reflection ever seems to move slower than you do, run. They say the shadow passenger isn't malevolent. She's lost, forever waiting for a flight she never caught. She walks the terminal's silent halls, replaying the same night over and over, her spirit caught between. Mexico City never truly sleeps. Its streets hum with restless life. Horns chatter, the pulsing rhythm of a city that breathes through concrete and exhaust. And at the heart of that sleepless machine sits Benito Juarez International Airport, the largest in the country, a place where millions come and go, where languages collide and where sometimes people vanish, not on paper, not in air, but in ways that leave no trace of physics or reason. For years, airport workers have whispered about one such disappearance, a bus that existed only long enough for people to board it before it was never seen again. They call it El Autobus Fantasma, the Phantom Bus. The first reports date back to 1997. That year, construction was underway on the old Terminal 1's auxiliary runway, a time when airport staff relied on shuttle buses to move passengers between terminals and aircraft parked far from the gates. One rainy night in June, a delayed Aeromexico flight from Cancun landed around 2:15 a.m. A group of 23 passengers were escorted to the tarmac shuttle, a white airport bus labeled Pista 3, meaning runway 3. The bus driver, Miguel Alvarez, was an 18-year veteran of the airport's transport service. Reliable, sober, known to everyone. He waved to his supervisor, started the engine, and rolled off toward the far end of the airfield. That was the last time anyone saw him. Or the bus. At first, air traffic control assumed it was a radio glitch. Communications with ground vehicles often flickered during storms. But when 15 minutes passed with no check-in, they dispatched a search vehicle. Nothing. The runway lights stretched endlessly through the rain. Tire tracks faded into mud, then disappeared. No debris, no signs of an accident. It was as if the bus had driven into the mist and never come out. Authorities launched a full-scale search. Security teams combed the entire airfield, nearby hangars, and service roads. Infrared sweeps, thermal imaging, nothing. Even more chilling, the CCTV footage from Gate 23, where the passengers boarded, showed the bus idling, doors closing, and the vehicle pulling away. But it never appeared again on any subsequent camera. The next camera on its route, a mere 300 meters away, showed only an empty road. By dawn, police expanded the perimeter search beyond airport grounds. Local news covered the story briefly. Shuttle vanishes in storm. The airport called it a tragic accident, suggesting the bus may have skidded into an old drainage canal. But divers found no wreckage, no evidence of oil or fuel leakage, nothing. Weeks passed. Families of the missing demanded answers. Airport officials eventually declared all passengers and the driver deceased, presumed lost. The file was closed, but the story didn't end there. In 2001, an airfield technician named Carlos Ortega reported seeing a bus late one night while driving a maintenance vehicle along runway 3. The air was heavy with fog, the kind that clings to your headlights and swallows sound. He saw an old shuttle bus parked on the shoulder, white, streaked with mud, the number Pista 3 painted on its side. Its headlights flickered weakly. Through the misted windshield, he could see passengers seated inside, staring straight ahead. He slowed down, thinking it was a breakdown. But as he approached, the bus lights dimmed, and the entire vehicle simply faded away, dissolving into the fog as if the mist itself swallowed it whole. Carlos filed a report with ground operations. He even sketched the bus number. They checked. No such bus was on the registry anymore. Pista 3 had been retired from the fleet in 1998. After that, whispers spread like wildfire among the night crews. Fuel attendants began refusing to service remote stands alone. Cleaners avoided the outer runways after midnight. Pilots taxiing on late-night routes reported strange lights, the silhouette of a bus crossing the taxiway, even when radar showed nothing there. In 2007, a group of trainee security officers was patrolling near Hangar 5 when they spotted headlights cutting through the mist. A bus moving slowly across the restricted zone. Toward the maintenance hangars, they tried radio contact. No response. They intercepted the route, blocking the road with their vehicle. But when the bus drew close, the headlights went dark, and the shape melted into nothingness. Just a rolling wave of fog left in its wake. The officers swore they could still hear the faint rumble of an engine long after it disappeared. The next morning, one of them, Officer Rios, handed in his resignation. He told his supervisor, "I saw their faces. They were all watching me, dead but awake." In 2010, during runway repairs, a contractor uncovered something unusual, a buried vehicle axle near the edge of the field. It matched the specifications of an airport shuttle manufactured in the 1990s. The discovery reignited the old mystery. But when investigators dug deeper, the axle vanished overnight. Airport management dismissed it as an unrelated find. But workers believed otherwise. By then, the legend had grown darker. Passengers claimed to see a bus idling outside Terminal 1's auxiliary gates during late-night hours, with no driver, no visible staff, just its doors open and engine idling softly. A woman named Lucia Mendoza, returning from a red-eye flight from Guadalajara, described it vividly in her report. It looked old, not like the new shuttle buses. The windows were fogged. The driver never moved. I thought maybe it was out of service, but then the doors hissed open. A few people got in from my flight. The doors closed and it pulled away. When she reached the terminal minutes later, she asked staff where the bus had gone. The attendant looked confused. There had been no shuttle scheduled at that gate. Lucia gave a detailed description. The bus's faded paint, the route label Pista 3, the smell of wet metal inside. The attendant grew pale. That route had been shut down 13 years ago. In 2013, the airport installed new motion sensors and high-definition cameras along the perimeter. During calibration, technicians recorded something that shouldn't have existed: faint heat signatures of a large vehicle moving across the tarmac. Unregistered, untagged. The data showed it for 22 seconds before vanishing mid-field. No vehicle in the airport's tracking system corresponded to it. A senior technician later said in an interview, anonymously, "It's like the air remembers it. Every few months, the same heat trail appears. Same shape, same path, always around 2:17 a.m., the same time the real bus disappeared." But perhaps the most disturbing report came in 2018 from a young flight attendant named Raquel Silva. She had just completed a long-haul flight from Lima and was waiting for a transport shuttle to her staff quarters. It was after 2 a.m., the terminal nearly deserted. A bus rolled up silently, older model, faded paint, lights dim. The driver, an older man with deep wrinkles, opened the doors without a word. She climbed aboard, taking a seat near the back. The bus smelled faintly of rain and rust. The windows were fogged, but she could see faint shapes seated ahead of her. None of them moved. None of them spoke. As the bus rolled along the service road, she glanced at the driver's mirror, but there was no reflection in it. When she blinked, she saw the passengers' faces for the first time, pale, dripping, eyes open but unblinking, fixed straight ahead. Raquel screamed. The bus jolted to a stop. The next thing she remembered was waking up inside the terminal security office, trembling and soaked in sweat. Security logs confirmed she had been found unconscious outside Gate 23, where the original passengers had boarded 2 decades earlier. Since then, the airport has taken silent measures. Runway 3 is now closed for maintenance every night between 2 and 3 a.m. No official reason given, but those who work there know the truth. Every few months during heavy fog, radar still registers an unexplained moving object along the same route. No vehicle ever found, no engine noise detected, just a faint hum through the radio static, the sound of an old bus engine idling in the distance, and sometimes, when the night is quiet enough, air traffic control receives a radio transmission, a man's voice, calm and tired, saying, "Pista 3 to tower, requesting clearance." Chicago, in the city of wind, steel, and sky, a place where thousands of flights rise and fall each day, where time itself seems measured by the thunder of engines and the hum of air traffic above the skyline. But beneath all that noise lies silence, and in that silence, something refuses to die. Every December 29th, at precisely 9:02 p.m., air traffic controllers at O'Hare International Airport witness something that defies explanation. A radar contact appears, just for a moment, on their screens. It has a transponder code, altitude data, and a registered flight ID. But there's one problem. That flight no longer exists. Its call sign, American Airlines, Flight 191, the same flight that, on May 25, 1979, lifted off from O'Hare's runway 32R and crashed seconds later, killing all 271 souls on board. To this day, it remains the deadliest aviation accident in U.S. history, and yet, somehow, Flight 191 still returns. Every year, same time, same path, same ghostly request for clearance. The story of Flight 191 began like any other flight that spring afternoon. It was a Friday before Memorial Day weekend. The weather was clear. The passengers, families, businessmen, newlyweds, all eager to reach Los Angeles. But at 3:04 p.m., just moments after takeoff, tragedy struck. The left engine tore loose from the wing, ripping away a crucial section of the hydraulic system. The aircraft tilted violently, rolled inverted, and plunged nose first into a nearby open field near Des Plaines, Illinois. Witnesses reported seeing a streak of metal descend in silence, followed by a deafening explosion that rattled windows miles away. The fireball consumed everything. When first responders arrived, they found a sea of twisted metal, luggage, and debris burning in the open field. The scent of jet fuel heavy in the air. No one survived. For weeks, the skies above O'Hare remained eerily quiet. Investigators combed through the wreckage, uncovering mechanical failures, maintenance shortcuts, and a chain of errors that doomed Flight 191 from the start. But as the official reports were filed and the runways reopened, strange things began happening inside the control tower. 3 days after the crash, the night shift radar technician James Parker logged a peculiar reading. At 9:02 p.m., the same moment the aircraft had disappeared from radar on the day of the crash, a faint blip appeared in the exact same coordinates. No flight plan, no transponder acknowledgement. Parker thought it was a system glitch. But then, through the static of the comms, came a faint voice. "Tower, this is American 191. Requesting climb clearance." He froze. The signal cut out almost instantly after that. When he replayed the tape, the frequency channel was dead. Nothing was there. He filed the report anyway. And within days, it was erased from FAA logs. Since then, it's happened again, and again, and again. Over the years, O'Hare's controllers have quietly whispered about the ghost flight. Those who work the late-night December shifts say the same thing. Every year, right before New Year's, the radar flares with the contact over Des Plaines. It moves exactly as the original DC-10 did. The same takeoff angle, the same speed, the same altitude. Before vanishing at the precise spot the plane went down. In 1998, radar controller Daniel Ruiz witnessed it firsthand. He was monitoring eastbound traffic that night, routine operations, until the anomaly appeared. It wasn't a blip or a glitch. It had a transponder ID that matched the exact registration number of Flight 191's airframe, a DC-10 long since scrapped. Ruiz radioed out. "Unidentified aircraft, this is O'Hare Tower, please identify." There was silence. Then, through the static, "O'Hare Tower, this is American 191. We've lost number 1 engine." The voice was calm, deliberate, like a pilot running through protocol. Then the line went dead. When Ruiz checked the playback, the voice was gone. No transmission, no signal record, just white noise. Stories like his spread among O'Hare staff like urban legend, but with each new account, the details aligned too precisely to ignore. Controllers described the same blip, the same voice, the same date. Maintenance workers spoke of strange lights near the old runway 32R, now renumbered, where the crash had begun. And Des Plaines residents, even decades later, reported hearing engines overhead late at night, though no aircraft were scheduled to fly that low. In 2015, a local man named Henry Wallace recorded audio from his backyard after hearing what sounded like a large jet throttling down. The clip captured a faint engine hum, followed by a desperate, almost metallic voice repeating, "Mayday, Mayday." The sound stopped abruptly. Aviation experts later analyzed the file and confirmed that the engine pitch matched a McDonnell Douglas DC-10, a model long retired from American Airlines fleet. Then came the 2019 anniversary, 40 years since the crash. An aircraft technician working night maintenance near runway 32R noticed something glimmering in the falling snow. He described it later as a plane with its landing lights on, maybe 200 feet above the ground, coming in too low and too slow. He radioed Tower, but they confirmed there was no aircraft on approach. He watched in disbelief as the silver-bodied jet descended, the red and blue stripe of American Airlines faint under the frost, and then vanished completely. No sound, no wake turbulence, just gone. When he investigated the spot the next morning, he found a small metal tag half buried in ice. It was blackened, corroded, stamped with a single number, 191. He kept it for years before quietly returning it to the makeshift memorial at the Des Plaines crash site. Those who visit that field say the place never feels empty. At night, the air smells faintly of burnt kerosene. Sometimes people hear the faint murmur of voices, clipped, professional, repeating emergency call-outs. Engine 1 failure. Losing altitude. Mayday. Mayday. Even local law enforcement has received 911 calls from motorists who've seen a low-flying jet trailing smoke near the area. When they respond, there's nothing, just cold wind and distant traffic from I-294. By the 2000s, the Federal Aviation Administration stopped commenting on the sightings altogether. But internal memos leaked by an ex-controller describe annual anomalous radar returns in the northern O'Hare sector on the anniversary date, always around 9 p.m. Central Time. Always brief, always the same. Some controllers started refusing to work the late December shift altogether. One even claimed that after responding to the ghost flight's transmission, her headset filled with the faint sound of heavy breathing and clicking instruments, as though someone were in the cockpit. Still going through the motions, the system glitched moments later, her console rebooting on its own. When the tower tech reviewed the feed, the recording was blank. O'Hare's staff now treats it as something unspoken but inevitable. Every December 29th, when the tower lights dim and the snow sweeps across the runways, someone in the control room will glance at the radar, and there it is, the phantom flight. For about a minute, the radar shows everything. Altitude 4,000 feet, airspeed 280 knots, descent vector matching Flight 191's original path. Then it blinks out, but sometimes before it does, the radio comes alive. O'Hare Tower, this is American 191. We're rolling. A line from a flight that ended 46 years ago. Whether it's electromagnetic interference, a misfiring radar echo, or something trapped between the living and the dead, no one knows for sure. But for the men and women who've heard that voice, who've seen London, a city of endless motion, where every hour the skies are filled with arrivals and departures, a ballet of aircraft cutting through the gray British clouds. Heathrow Airport, the beating heart of that sky. Each year, over 80 million passengers pass through its gates. Business travelers, tourists, soldiers, and families, all trusting that the calm, measured voices in the control tower above are watching, guiding, and keeping order amid the chaos. But on one winter night in January 1986, that voice went silent, and the men and women behind it simply vanished. It was the 7th of January 1986, one of the coldest nights in Heathrow's recorded history. The air was thick with frost. A damp mist rolled across the tarmac, swallowing entire aircraft in its gray breath. Visibility had dropped below 50 meters. At 2 a.m., 6 staff members occupied the North Control Tower, a facility responsible for handling runway coordination during late-night operations. The team consisted of Senior Controller Malcolm Reeves, his assistant David Cole, radar technician Susan Harper, and 3 communications officers, all seasoned professionals. Their shift began like any other. Routine communications, cargo flights in from Berlin, a few red-eye departures bound for New York, nothing unusual. Until 2:37 a.m., that's when Heathrow's radar systems froze. Every instrument in the North Tower blinked simultaneously, a short electrical pulse that shut down communications for nearly 50 seconds. Then, without warning, the radar came back online. But something was wrong. A new aircraft had appeared on the screen, an inbound flight tagged with the call sign, Speedbird 452. At first, Reeves assumed it was a glitch. The code was familiar, an old British Airways tag once used by British European Airways Flight 548, better known as the Staines air disaster of 1972, one of the worst aviation tragedies in UK history. That flight had crashed just minutes after takeoff from Heathrow, killing all 118 aboard, and its final recorded transmission was eerily similar. Speedbird 452, requesting approach clearance. Reeves froze. He leaned toward the radio panel, his hand trembling slightly as he pressed the transmit key. Speedbird 452, this is Heathrow Tower. Confirm your position. For several seconds there was nothing, only static. Then a man's voice came through, calm, professional, distinctly British. Heathrow Tower, Speedbird 452, descending through 2,000 feet, visibility low. Reeves exchanged a glance with Harper, the radar tech. There was no such flight scheduled. The airspace was empty. Speedbird 452, say again your approach vector? Reeves asked. The reply was slower this time, laced with distortion. Requesting runway 27 left. Correction. Something's wrong with our instruments. Harper later told investigators that the air temperature in the tower dropped suddenly, so fast that her breath became visible. The lights flickered, and when the radar sweep passed over the phantom signal again, it aligned perfectly over the coordinates where the 1972 Staines crash had occurred. Then came the second transmission. A woman's voice this time, faint, trembling. "Tower, this is Speedbird 452. We're descending too fast." "Do you copy?" Reeves grabbed his headset. "Speedbird 452, pull up immediately." "You're too low." But the signal cut off. The blip on the radar slowed, then froze, and finally vanished. Seconds later, the entire tower lost power. Backup generators restored partial electricity within 90 seconds. When the emergency crew entered the control tower, they found the systems running, but not a single person inside. The chairs were overturned. Headsets still hung from their arms. A cup of coffee sat on the console, still steaming. The room temperature had plummeted to 9 degrees Celsius, nearly 20 degrees lower than the rest of the building. Every clock in the room had stopped at 2:39 a.m. Police and airport security scoured the entire facility. The tower doors had remained locked from the inside. No forced entry, no footprints leading away from the stairs or the elevator. It was as though the crew had simply evaporated. By dawn, an emergency statement was issued, citing a power systems malfunction and temporary closure for staff medical evaluation. But the public never heard what really happened. Behind closed doors, an internal memo circulated among Heathrow's senior aviation staff. It described unexplained electromagnetic anomalies, untraceable radio frequencies, and missing personnel unaccounted for during blackout window. The incident was immediately classified under Category Black, Restricted Operations Log. In the weeks that followed, things only got stranger. Night shift controllers at the South Tower, the newer facility that took over operations, began reporting phantom transmissions late at night. Always from the same frequency, always the same call sign, Speedbird 452 requesting approach clearance. When they replayed the communication logs, the voice never appeared on the tape. Yet several controllers heard it at the same time, clear as day. Even more chilling were the whispers in the background of the transmission. Dozens of faint overlapping voices, coughs, instrument clicks, crew chatter, the unmistakable sounds of an active cockpit. One technician swore he could hear the phrase repeated over and over, "Brace for impact. Brace for impact." Another claimed to hear a woman crying softly between bursts of static. The transmissions only occurred in thick fog and always within the same 15-minute window around 2:30 to 2:45 a.m., exactly when the tower crew vanished. A month later, during maintenance of the North Tower, engineers discovered something buried deep behind the radar console, a magnetic audio reel, dated January 7, 1986. The tape ran for 26 minutes, filled mostly with dead air and low-frequency static. But toward the end, at 2:38 a.m., the voices returned. A man's voice, almost certainly Reeves, is heard saying, "Speedbird 452, you're not listed on any active flight plan. Identify yourself." There's a pause. Then a slow, echoing response, layered with interference, like several voices speaking at once. "We never landed." A loud shriek of distortion followed. Then the tape ended. The reel was archived by the Civil Aviation Authority and has never been released publicly. Its existence is only known through leaked transcripts published years later by a retired investigator. But even without it, the legend endured. In 1989, the abandoned North Tower was briefly reopened for calibration testing. During one of these sessions, technicians reported seeing figures inside the glass observation deck after hours, silhouettes standing motionless by the consoles. When security checked, the room was empty. One guard described the faint sound of radio chatter coming from inside the sealed tower. He recorded a brief clip on his handheld radio. A male voice, clipped in British, was heard saying, "Heathrow Tower," requesting approach vector, and just before it faded, another softer voice whispered, "Tell them we're still here." Today, the North Tower no longer exists. It was demolished during Heathrow's 2005 expansion, but construction crews who worked on site swore the ground beneath it hummed when fog rolled in. Their equipment would malfunction. Singapore, a nation known for precision, order, and control. Nothing here is out of place. The trains arrive to the second, the streets are spotless, and even the air feels organized, calm, efficient, predictable. But beneath the gleaming glass and steel of Changi Airport, something has always been a little off. Passengers feel it, workers talk about it, and old-timers warn newcomers never to linger too long underground. Because there's a part of Changi, that was never meant to exist. It began in 1997, just a few months after Terminal 2 officially opened. The new baggage handling system was state-of-the-art, fully automated, capable of sorting over 50,000 pieces of luggage per day. A marvel of engineering, tucked beneath the passenger floors in a maze of conveyor belts, hydraulic arms, and magnetic sensors stretching for miles. To most travelers, it was invisible, but for the men and women working those tunnels, the place had its own rhythm, a constant metallic heartbeat that pulsed through the concrete. The night crew worked in 12-hour shifts, guiding luggage carts, clearing jams, and running maintenance on the system's narrow tracks. The temperature was always cold, the air always dry, and the deeper you went, the less sound carried from the world above. On the night of October 23, 1997, a 6-man maintenance crew reported for the graveyard shift at 11 p.m. They were assigned to subsection B12, one of the oldest maintenance corridors directly beneath Terminal 2's departure gates. Team leader Rahman Iskandar, a veteran with 15 years on the job, made a note in his logbook. Routine system recalibration, 2-hour job, expected finish 1 a.m. By morning, none of them would be seen again. At exactly 12:47 a.m., the main control room upstairs received an error signal from subsection B12, an automatic safety alert indicating motion sensors had tripped, then gone offline. Operators tried to re-establish contact through radio, but there was no response. When 2 supervisors went down to check, they found the access tunnel eerily silent. The conveyor belts were still running. The lights flickered weakly in the distance. But the crew was gone. Their equipment sat neatly along the service wall. Toolkits open, flashlights still on, safety helmets resting beside the conveyor track. A half-finished thermos of coffee sat upright on a metal crate, still warm to the touch. Airport police launched a full-scale search within the hour. Every access point, every shaft, every drain pipe sealed off and checked. Thermal scanners found no body heat signatures. Dogs refused to enter subsection B12 altogether. They whined and pulled at their leashes until handlers gave up. Security footage from that night showed nothing unusual. The men entered the service lift at 11:04 p.m. After that, the camera feed from B12 went dark for exactly 2 minutes and 18 seconds. When it returned, the tunnel was empty. An internal memo later confirmed that during those missing 2 minutes, Changi's central baggage system registered an unclassified load, roughly human-sized, moving along the conveyor at 60 kilometers per hour toward the southern junction. But no object matching that description was ever recovered. One technician claimed he saw something on the monitors before the footage cut out. A dark shape crawling against the motion of the belts, fast and jerky like a person moving on all fours. He quit the next day. Rumors spread quickly among the staff. Some said the missing men had been taken, not kidnapped, but absorbed somehow into the tunnels. Others believed the corridor itself was cursed. It wasn't built over bedrock, they said, but over an older foundation, a section of land that had once been a Japanese military holding site during World War II. Records later confirmed it. In 1943, the area beneath modern Changi had been part of the Kempeitai prison complex, where Allied prisoners were tortured and executed. The tunnels used for baggage transport had been dug through the same soil where hundreds of men were buried. Weeks passed. The official statement to the public claimed the workers had been lost during an accidental systems malfunction. No further details released. But internally, the case was far from closed. By mid-November, reports from night staff began piling up. Baggage carts moved on their own. Belts restarted after shutdown, and workers claimed to hear footsteps following them deep underground. Footsteps that matched no living schedule. One night, a janitor cleaning near the access corridor swore he saw movement behind the safety gate. He described a man in a reflective vest standing perfectly still by the conveyor, except his face was completely blank, just smooth skin where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. The security team reviewed the footage. The camera glitched the moment the figure appeared. Then, in early 1998, a new maintenance worker named Xiao Yang went missing for 6 hours during a shift near the same sector. When he was finally found, he was sitting cross-legged on the cold floor, staring blankly into the dark, whispering the same phrase over and over in Malay. "They're still working." When asked who, he pointed down the tunnel and said softly, "Rahman and the others." They never clocked out. Xiao was later transferred and never returned to work. In 2001, Changi Airport closed subsection B12 permanently. The official reason given was infrastructure consolidation. But insiders know the truth. Nobody wanted to go down there anymore. Since then, several contractors who've worked in nearby maintenance sectors have reported ghost radio chatter, faint voices coming through their headsets late at night. Always the same pattern: clanking metal, heavy breathing, and a man's voice saying, "We're still calibrating. Give us 10 more minutes." When the operators reply, the voices vanish. One of the most disturbing accounts came in 2013, when a systems engineer testing new sensors accidentally reactivated the old B12 frequency. His terminal immediately populated with a new worker ID tag, R. Iskandar, active. The same ID number belonging to the missing team leader from 1997. The system auto-assigned his status as on shift. When the engineer attempted to delete the record, the screen flickered, and a single message appeared in the log window. "Please don't turn the lights off. We're almost done." The message deleted itself seconds later. Today, that section of the tunnels is sealed with reinforced concrete. No official map lists it anymore, and most new employees have never heard of subsection B12, but veteran ground staff still whisper about it, especially those who work alone during foggy nights, when the conveyor belts start humming for no reason. They say if you stand quietly by the maintenance gate around 1 a.m., you'll hear the faint whirring of tools echoing through the sealed corridor. And if you listen closely enough, under the grinding of machinery and the low thump of rubber belts, you might just hear voices, calm, professional, still working. System calibration complete. Rahman reporting ready for inspection. But there's no one there. And there hasn't been for almost 30 years. Hidden beneath 2,000 feet of cold Colorado granite lies a fortress that was never meant to see daylight. NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. A labyrinth of tunnels, steel blast doors, and secret corridors carved into the heart of Cheyenne Mountain. For decades, it stood as humanity's ultimate watchtower, its eyes fixed on the skies, its ears tuned to every whisper across the Earth's ionosphere. But in December of 1989, those ears heard something they shouldn't have, and whatever answered that night wasn't human. The story begins on a cold winter night, December 12th, 1989. Outside, a blizzard was crawling down from the Rockies, coating Colorado Springs in a blanket of snow. Inside the mountain, the night shift was routine, hums of servers, quiet chatter, and the constant pulse of radar beacons sweeping the globe. At exactly 03:14 a.m., Sergeant William Bill Harrow, a radar technician stationed in Sublevel 2, noticed something strange. A contact appeared on his console, bright, erratic, entering the atmosphere from a high polar trajectory. At first he assumed it was a satellite glitch, but then the reading stabilized. Right above Hudson Bay, Canada. Speed, 22,000 miles per hour. Altitude, 43,000 feet. Then, impossibly, it stopped. The object hovered, motionless, for over 4 minutes before splitting into 8 identical signatures, forming a perfect geometric pattern across the radar display. Then, just as suddenly, all 8 vanished. Harrow called it in. Within seconds, the main command floor was flooded with officers and analysts. No satellite confirmations, no visual detection. The Air Force's top surveillance systems, blind, and then came the voice, a transmission, faint, warped, threaded with static, leaked into the secure frequency. Not incoming from outside, but originating from within the mountain itself. "Transmission received," the voice said. "We are here." Then silence. The duty commander, Colonel Everett Lang, immediately locked the base down. All communications were suspended. No one in or out. Lang dispatched a security detail to Sublevel 3, deep communications where experimental long-range receivers were being tested. But when they arrived, something was wrong. The corridor lights flickered violently. Temperature in the room had dropped nearly 15 degrees, and the hum of electronics, normally deafening, had fallen into an unnatural silence. 3 technicians were missing, their chairs pushed back, their terminals still active. On every screen, the same message blinked in pale green text. Hello, NORAD. No prompt. No program. No known source. When a systems engineer attempted to terminate the process, the cursor froze, and the monitors began to type on their own. Do not interrupt the transmission. Then the power went out. The backup generators kicked in 20 seconds later. When light returned, the terminals were blank. No files, no history, no trace of what had been running. But on one screen, a flicker of static lingered, a reflection that didn't match anyone standing there. The recording from that camera was sealed within hours. Those who've claimed to see it describe a pale face, partially illuminated in the glow of the monitors, leaning into view, expressionless, as though looking directly through the screen. That same night, a seismic reading registered a localized tremor beneath the mountain. NORAD classified it as mechanical disturbance, but those in the control room described it differently. They said the walls themselves seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting, as if the mountain was alive. And through the ventilation ducts came a low hum, like radio static laced with human voices. An operator monitoring Sub-Level 3's microphone feed said he heard whispers on the line, not words, but syllables, repeating over and over in a rhythm that almost sounded like breathing. When he boosted the gain to analyze it, the sound formed 2 words. We're inside. Then the feed cut to white noise. For the next 48 hours, NORAD went completely silent to the outside world. Phones disconnected, lines jammed. Even Washington couldn't get through. Within the mountain, rumors spread like fire. The missing men were still alive, wandering somewhere in the tunnels. Others believed they had triggered something, a transmission not meant for human contact. Technicians claimed that when they powered up the communications array again, it auto-booted a new process, Signal 1212. It would start transmitting on its own at random intervals, always on the same frequency, repeating the same sequence of numbers, coordinates that led nowhere on any map, and whenever they tried to shut it down, the entire system froze. Weeks later, NORAD's internal audit team recovered a tape, a reel of magnetic recording found lodged in one of the old backup drives. It contained 29 seconds of audio from the night of the incident. The recording begins with static, then a male voice, muffled but distinct. This is Harrow. We're getting feedback from Sub-Level 3. Multiple returns. Are you reading this? A pause. Then a second voice, faint, distant, female. They answered, and then the sound of screaming. Metal buckling. The recording ends. The tape was marked Classified Level 4 and sealed within Air Force archives. It has never been released to the public. In the years that followed, those who had been stationed inside Cheyenne Mountain that winter spoke quietly about the December transmission. Many resigned. A few disappeared without explanation. One of them, a communications officer named Lut Andrew Collins, was found dead in his home in 1993. On his desk was a cassette recorder still running. The tape captured 11 minutes of ambient noise, and in the last 30 seconds, a sound identical to the NORAD frequency hum. A voice whispered through the static, transmission received. By 2002, when NORAD upgraded its infrastructure after 9/11, engineers found something buried deep within the legacy network, an encrypted folder, hidden in a directory that should have been wiped years before. The file name, NORAD last TX. Size, 0 KB, empty, except when opened it generated text in real time. The same phrase repeating endlessly across the screen. We are still waiting for a reply. One engineer printed it out as proof, but when he brought the paper upstairs, the ink had bled, the letters warped unreadable, like static frozen on the page. He never went back underground. Today, NORAD operates primarily out of Peterson Space Force Base, but the original Cheyenne Mountain complex remains in warm standby mode, partially active, manned by minimal staff. Yet, every December 12th, the logs show something impossible. At 03:14 a.m., a system in the decommissioned Sub-Level 3 powers on for exactly 89 seconds. It emits a single transmission, always on the same frequency. Transmission received. Then it shuts itself off. Some say it's a glitch, a remnant code buried in the old Cold War infrastructure. Others, including former radar technicians, believe the transmission isn't coming from Cheyenne Mountain at all, but to it that whatever answered in 1989 has been sending the same message every year since, waiting, listening. And if you happen to be in Colorado Springs on a snowy December night, tune your shortwave radio to 143.75 MHz around 3:15 a.m. You might hear it for yourself, a low pulsing tone, followed by a voice, faint but deliberate. This is NORAD command. We never lost contact. Then the frequency goes silent, and the mountain sleeps again. Las Vegas is a city that never truly sleeps. Beneath the bright neon signs, the endless sound of slot machines, and the illusion of fortune, there's a different kind of energy, one that hums quietly beneath the surface. A darkness that doesn't belong to casinos or crime, but to something older, colder, and much harder to explain. Just beyond the glittering strip, past the desert edge where the city lights die into nothing, sits McCarran International Airport, now renamed, but forever carrying its old ghosts. Every night, the control tower glows like a lone beacon above the vast black tarmac. And for decades, air traffic controllers have whispered about one particular night. A night when an aircraft that shouldn't exist tried to land. It began on March 16, 1962. That was the day Flying Tiger Line Flight 739, a U.S. military charter, vanished somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. 93 souls, soldiers, crew and civilians, disappeared without a trace. There were no distress calls, no radar signatures, only silence. Search teams scoured over 200,000 square miles of ocean. Not a single piece of wreckage was ever found. The official report listed the cause as undetermined. But in the years that followed, something far stranger began to unfold, not over the Pacific, but here. Above the Nevada desert, controllers at McCarran started reporting phantom radar echoes. They'd appear suddenly, a small blip, moving in from the west, cruising at 35,000 feet. At first, they dismissed it as interference. But then came the radio call. "McCarran Tower, this is Flying Tiger 739 requesting final approach. Over." The first controller to hear it, Alan Rhodes, nearly dropped his headset. He thought someone was pulling a prank, until the voice repeated the call, clearer this time, calm and steady in standard military cadence. "Requesting vector to runway 26, over." Rhodes responded instinctively, asking for the aircraft's position. But when he checked the radar screen again, the blip was gone. The airspace was empty. Moments later, the voice faded into static. At first, the incident was dismissed as a glitch, a misrouted signal from some other tower. But then it happened again and again. Always on the same date, March 16th, always around 11:40 p.m., and always the same voice, calm, composed, and utterly unaware that 60 years had passed since Flight 739 had disappeared. The phenomenon became known internally as the Phantom Flight of McCarran. Controllers began logging the events, over a dozen separate reports spanning decades. Each time, the same thing occurred: radar contact from the west, followed by the ghostly transmission. One controller, John Delaney, who worked the tower during the late 1980s, gave his account in a declassified FAA report that later leaked online. He wrote, "At 23:42 hours, radar picked up an inbound target at 35,000 feet. The transponder was blank. I made radio contact and received a clear response identifying as Flying Tiger 739. When I requested fuel status and passenger count, the voice said, 'All soldiers accounted for. ETA 4 minutes.' The radar contact disappeared 20 seconds later. The voice never returned." Delaney later added that he'd heard something else through his headset after the signal faded. Faint, distorted voices layered under static, repeating the same word over and over. Home. The FAA conducted an internal investigation. They ruled out all known aircraft in the region. Military radar logs from Nellis Air Force Base showed no flights, no signals, no transmissions that night. They found nothing, but for the men and women who worked those night shifts, it became something of a ritual. Every year, as the anniversary approached, they would grow uneasy. Some brought coffee and stayed past their shifts. Others refused to work the tower entirely. One controller said it felt like the sky itself was listening. In 1992, a young trainee named Ellen Perez experienced the event firsthand. She was new, eager, and skeptical of all the ghost stories passed down through the years. But that night at 11:38 p.m., the tower's radar system flickered to life. A single echo appeared. "Heading east, altitude 35,000, speed 200 knots. There was no flight plan filed, no transponder ping, and then the radio hissed. "McCarran Tower, this is Flying Tiger 739 requesting permission to land." Ellen froze. The voice was crystal clear, but muffled slightly, like it was being broadcast through water. She responded, voice trembling, "Flying Tiger 739, state your position." The reply came instantly. "Approach from the west, visibility clear. Fuel is low. Request immediate landing." Outside, the night was still. The desert stretched endlessly, no lights on the horizon. And yet, the air smelled faintly of fuel. She looked out through the glass, across the runways illuminated by steady amber lamps. And for a moment, she swore she saw it. A dark silhouette descending, wheels down, lights blinking red and green. But then the plane vanished mid-air, no impact, no explosion, just gone. When the recording was played back later, investigators heard something no one could explain. After the voice said, "Request immediate landing," a second voice whispered beneath it, almost imperceptible, "We never left." Audio technicians confirmed the voice wasn't a feedback loop or artifact. It was someone else, speaking just milliseconds apart. Two voices on one transmission. By the early 2000s, McCarran had become one of the busiest airports in America. But despite modernization, radar upgrades, and digital encryption, the phenomenon persisted. Controllers in 2005 and 2011 filed separate reports of the same phantom contact. Always March 16th, always 11:40 p.m. Each report archived, sealed, and quietly forgotten. But in 2022, on the 60th anniversary of Flight 739's disappearance, the ghost flight returned one last time. Only this time it wasn't just heard, it was seen. A Southwest pilot descending into McCarran reported visual confirmation of an aircraft flying parallel to his older model. Military markings, no navigation lights. He said it matched the profile of a Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation, the same aircraft used for Flight 739. He described it as semi-transparent, like a projection or a reflection. The co-pilot confirmed the sighting. Seconds later, it was gone from view, and radar never registered it at all. The FAA dismissed the report. But tower recordings leaked weeks later revealed something chilling. Amid the static, right before the signal cut out, the voice returned. Distant, fading, but unmistakable. McCarran Tower. We're still waiting for clearance. Then silence. Today, controllers still mention it in hushed tones. Some say you can catch it on open airband frequencies if you tune between 121.9 and 122.1 MHz around midnight every March 16th. A faint crackle, a burst of static, and if you listen closely enough, a male voice repeating, "This is Flying Tiger 739, requesting final approach." Those who've recorded it say it doesn't sound like it's coming from above, but from somewhere below. And if you visit McCarran's runways late at night, when the desert wind dies and the neon glow fades, some ground crews claim to see it. The faint outline of a super constellation descending through the haze, lights flickering in the distance, wheels almost touching the ground, before dissolving into nothing. No impact, no sound. Just the echo of an arrival that never came. And so every March 16th, the controllers of McCarran still answer that call, even though they know there's nothing there. Because if they don't, the voice on the radio grows louder. "McCarran Tower, do you read? We're running out of fuel. We need to come home." And in the silence that follows as the static fades, you can almost hear the hum of propellers turning somewhere deep inside the desert night. A flight still circling, forever trying to land.